Each life we incarnate into has a divine purpose. For the majority of people on this planet, their purpose has eluded them. We have become so distracted with the struggle to survive that we have forgotten what we are here to do. In alignment with the sacred laws of nature, the ultimate purpose of all existence is to create and evolve. We certainly do not incarnate into life with the intention to destroy. And yet, we have come to live in a very destructive world. As a result, there are many out there who feel lost or adrift, whilst knowing deep down inside that something is very wrong with their reality. Many people wish they could do something of value, anything that is purposeful, instead of having to submit to a system of slavery in order to survive. It is important never to let go of that feeling. That is your soul crying out to you, telling you that your life has value and that you do indeed have a purpose. The most important thing you can do in life is to recognize your purpose, and often that requires a lot of soul searching. Life indeed dishes out some pretty tough challenges, which will either move you closer towards your purpose path, or will give you great training for when you finally realize what it is that you came here to do. But more often than not, the very clues about your life's purpose are hidden in plain sight, woven into the very fabric of our existence. But we are so easily distracted by irrelevant details that don't really matter, that often we miss the very obvious right in front of us. It is because of our willful ignorance of anything that does not fit our preconceived ideas that the truth about the nature of our reality is so readily hidden in plain sight. This is a very deep and personal journey, which has come to be expressed in many aspects throughout my life. This is not just an attempt to retell a bunch of research and pass it off as my own, for I am very grateful and openly acknowledge all the many wonderful people that I have been given the opportunity to work with and to learn from in order to get to the point where I've come to know what I now know. This is a journey I was always destined to go on, and likewise, how I have come to know this information forms as much a part of the story as the information itself.
Your life.
Hello and good evening, everybody. My name is Mel V, and this is the first episode of a brand new series called Dragonology. This has been a bit of a passion of mine for a very long time, and it's really great to be able to finally present this information doing something that I really enjoy, which is teaching. And I've just, I suppose, been waiting for a little bit of an opportunity with all the work we've been doing with CCN to actually get this material together into a form that would be complementary to the software and the style that we've developed here. So I want to say a big hello and thank you to everybody who has joined in. I hope this is going to be interesting, and I hope that you will learn a little bit of something tonight, even if you're familiar with the subjects of dragons and
that realm of information. I'm sure there's a few things in here that you probably haven't heard. I wanted to first off reference a book that I got 20 years ago now, and I'm going to hold this up here so you can see this. It's the Encyclopedia of Mythology, an illustrated encyclopedia, and you can see it's like all torn and dog-eared, and this has got my scribble notes. I haven't just gone onto Wikipedia and download a whole bunch of stuff. You can see I've really, over the years, hammered this thing to bits. Very interesting story. I picked this up at a secondhand bookstore on my college campus in 1995. So I've had this for 20 years, and I didn't take this with me from South Africa when I left and moved to London in 1999. It was upon a trip back to South Africa in 2010 when I found this amongst some of my mother's old books. I'd actually taken a whole bunch of my David Icke and Lloyd Pye and all of that sort of thing out there to leave behind for my mom to hopefully read, because she does read, but largely Mills and Boons and that sort of stuff. So I found this on a bookshelf. It was one of my old books, and what it did was it reminded me that I have always had a calling and a passion for mythology since a very young age. And in fact, the very watered-down version of myths and legends we were given when we were at school just simply didn't do any justice to the actual scope and vast complexity of the world of mythology. So basically, I'd like to talk a little bit about the definitions of myth and legend, okay? Myth and legend, well, to be honest with you, I have been looking for a long time to find an accurate definition, and I've not yet been able to find one. To be honest with you, there doesn't seem to be any way of describing whether you're looking at something that's real or whether this is to be taken into account as an actual historical event. Because when you taught the stuff in school, they don't kind of categorize it the way when you taught history, you taught World War I happened and this a date, and ended this and this a date. But when we were kind of sort of brushed over the area of myths and legends, which we kind of did in sort of art history and various subjects where it was kind of imperative to go there in order to get the understanding and the background. For example, speech and drama went a lot into Greek theatre, and with that you got to understand a little bit about the culture, of course, which we will go into today, and the myths and legends that then accompanied them, because these things are referenced in the plays which we were taught. For example, one good example is a play called Antigone, which I actually performed in and had to learn the entire Greek script. So, you know, when you start looking into the symbolism and stuff that they've been playing in through their mythology, you start to realize that there's stuff going on there that we've, you know, kind of been taught nowadays is semi-dismissive. In fact, as I say, the definition of legendary and mythological have been widely debated with no widely agreed upon application. In fact, I really have to pose the question, is mythology real? Because what we have to understand about history as we know it is that there's a lot of flawed current version of history that we're taught in mainstream media and in education, and that we're expected to believe, that is passed down. We've also been taught that mythology should be kind of relegated to fantasy, folklore, not accurate history. But I think considering that our history probably isn't very real, maybe mythology is. Should we be asking the question, is mythology real? Because the interest in mythology has grown steadily throughout the last 100 years. And it's peaked especially in recent years, since the Great Awakening has taken hold of people who are now empowered by the realization that myths are not just pre-scientific explanations of the world or childish stories made up in order to account for the forces of the universe. Rather, what we consider as mythology provides some accurate insight into reality. Myths and legends exist in all societies and are part of the very fabric of human life, molding behavior, expressing belief, and justifying institutions, as often many superstitions, religions, and rituals are based upon them. Now, what I want to draw attention to here is some of these creatures which are drawn here. I come across these sort of, what I would say, 18th century, 19th century drawings, compilations, bestiaries. Actually, they're pretty common right from the Middle Ages. I found some in the 1500s. People who have, over time, collected through the various stories and from artworks and whatnot, bits and pieces of beasts and creatures together. And you find, as I go through this, we'll show you lots of different explanations of these sort of creatures, which as we also progress through the material, you'll begin to realize are actually all, more than likely, the very same creature. The Encyclopedia of Mythology defines myths as imaginative traditions about nature, history, and the destiny of the world, the gods, man, and society. They are concepts which deserve serious attention for what they mean to those who believe in them, and as statements about the fundamental issues in life. One of the disadvantages of the old-fashioned derogatory use of the word myth to mean a foolish story or a false idea is the implication that myths are trivial. The reality is, in fact, the reverse. It is the things which people find important that find place in their mythology. And that was taken directly out of this, the introduction part of this book. So just to show you where I get all my source material from, or some of it, but this is a number of books that have compiled to all this. Mythology largely comprises of that collection of old human stories which are widely regarded by the ignorant and the majority as fanciful tales of impossible heroes and gods from long-gone eras, which have been imprisoned in limited available lexicons of successive verbally orientated cultural histories. Even the use of the word myth or mythology limits the idea one can have of this cultural history by identifying it specifically with a particular era or cultural deity. Now that's interesting because what we will try to do through the course of this material is also realign our language. Where does the word myth come from? The pre-Christian Romans practiced the religion of Mithraism, and the word myth originates with the god they worshipped, which is Mithra, which is a Roman sun god. And have a look at this. This is quite a rare picture, I beg your pardon, this picture here. It actually shows Mithra. It's one of the rarest depictions I've seen of Mithra, but really it actually shows him with anthropomorphic features, animalized dragon-like features, the snake twisting around him, standing on an orb or a moon, which is quite common of the mother goddess, with wings. And the sharp talons, looking a bit more like a lion, like a sun god. Lions are symbolic of sun gods, but also they masked the dragon. Here we've got Mithra. Again, Mithra is often represented with sun rays coming out from behind his head and is often referenced by the Latin term Sol Invictus, meaning the unconquered sun. All right, so there we've got the sun rays coming out from behind his head. And of course, the unconquered sun leads on to this. Napoleon Bonaparte once said, "History is written by the victors, and indeed it is the losers who get written about. History is determined by the dominant culture," which basically means that it is the murderers and villains of history that get to decide what the people of the future know about their past. And that has been largely done over the last 2,000 years, if not longer, through the Babylonian cult, but certainly in the last 2,000 years, if not more, through the Roman cult, probably much further back than that. It's just taken on different names over the years. But where it is very provably traceable is through the language and all the languages that have evolved from Latin using the Roman alphabet. So the Roman cult basically used the Latin language, which is pretty much considered a dead language now. Well, it's not dead. It's just not in circulation within the public. They've kind of kept it to, it's not taught necessarily as first languages, except if you're living in the Vatican, of course. And of course, this is why the word Latin means hidden. Famous author Philip K. Dick, he said, "The basic tool for manipulation of reality is the manipulation of words. If you can control the meaning of words, you can control the people who misuse those words." So, dragonology, the more accurate term for cultural histories, would be to reference it not as mythology, but as dragonology. Hence why I was saying we need to realign our language, because using the word mythology limits the idea we can have of this particular genre of study. In fact, as we go through this, you'll see why the term dragonology is far more befitting of looking through this cultural history and then having to attach a label to it so that we can somehow conscientize it within a framework of the human mind. Dragons are everywhere. The patterns and similarities between dragons of distant geographical regions indicate that whatever the dragon race is or was, at some point they were absolutely everywhere. Dragons were equally revered, worshipped, loved, and feared by almost every ancient culture on our planet. And again, an example of old books, manuscript, hand-drawn examples. You can see a lot of detail in these, the artists put into this, trying to depict these dragons, whether they'd actually seen them or whether they had picked up descriptions through various bestiaries to recreate this. You can see that there's quite a bit of detail and thought that has gone into the way these critters look. So there must be some truth to whether or not dragons are real, whether they're mythological creatures or whether they actually exist in history. Dragons took on many different forms as different cultures interpreted these creatures in their own language, symbolism, and artistic representations. I would typically say this would fall under the classification of the basilisk dragon because of the cockatrice-like features, which we'll show you some more of as we go through. Despite the fact that the dragon has been represented in many different ways, the basic stories, themes, language, and symbolism tie together all these creatures across different cultures of history. Again, this is another piece from an old manuscript, different to the one before, and you can see a lot of detail has gone into these etchings of dragons, wood etchings, which are then reprinted. Someone really understood what these creatures looked like. Dragons in the sky. The Draco constellation gives homage to a supposedly non-existent creature. Now, of course, people are going to say, yes, but there's centaurs and all sorts of things represented in the sky, all sorts of mythological representations, but there also just happens to be the Draco constellation, which I find very interesting indeed. Dragons in the Chinese zodiac. The Chinese zodiac, which of course is known as the Shenzhou, is very interesting. I'm born in the year of the dragon, 1976 over here. Although the dragon is the only creature in the Chinese zodiac that is not an everyday, commonly found creature, it is said to contain the attributes of all 11 other animals on the Chinese zodiac. And of course, this is known as the Shenzhou. So although it is not a commonly everyday known creature, and that is acknowledged sort of by the philosophy they have, that this creature actually contains the features of all the others. Very interesting. It's almost like he was the original, the source of all the others. As I said, I was born 1976, year of the dragon, and I won't get into the trip down Amnesia Lane tonight, but I can tell you some freaky stories from my life of how I've been just always around people who are absolutely obsessed with dragons, including my partner Biggie, who, by the way, is also born on the year of the dragon and has dragon wings tattooed on his back, which he had done for his 29th birthday whilst we still lived in London, long before he ever found out about, reptilians and stuff. So this fascination of ours just goes way back. Even when I was in college, one of my flatmates, also just a guy completely obsessed with dragons, massive dragon ring, and he was the one who used to tell me that people were dragons, and I thought he was crazy back then. But there's always just been this thing niggling beneath the perception of my reality, telling me to go there, look there, and find out what the hell these things really are, because they're absolutely everywhere. Dragons are everywhere. And I love Asian food, particularly Chinese and Thai, and when we can afford it, sushi. But I challenge anybody to find a Chinese restaurant that does not have dragons depicted somewhere within it, either on the menu or on the cover that slides on up and down the chopsticks, or on the chopsticks themselves, or carved onto one of the wooden panels in the restaurant, or on the silk bunting on the curtains. You will always find a dragon somewhere in these establishments. Chinese dragons are synonymous with their culture. The Chinese culture, I beg your pardon, is synonymous with dragons. And this dragon over here is a very beautiful depiction. It's a close-up of the sacred 9-dragon wall, which is in the Imperial Chinese Palace Gardens, and I would just absolutely love to see it one day. It's got 9 dragons on. The Chinese dragon is described as having 9 attributes, and the history talks of the 9 sons of the dragons, who in turn spawned the emperors of China. Now, this is interesting because this is where we talk about where the ruling royalty and bloodlines of today supposedly get their, divine right of kings to rule. Medieval dragons. Now, I've come across so many of these manuscripts, handwritten, beautiful. You can even see where the lines are placed so that they can get this calligraphy dead straight. And endless depictions, hand-drawn depictions, beautiful, very detailed hand-drawn depictions of dragons all over the show in medieval antique books. And some of the best depictions and descriptions of dragons can be found in collectional books called medieval bestiaries, which basically is a book of beasts, a medieval book of beasts. And they've been rewritten and reinterpreted several times, but you can actually get some pretty good source translations nowadays, and the original artwork's pretty much still intact. Okay, so now we start to travel around the world and see where dragons are, which cultures these guys were actually in, and they're just absolutely everywhere, every single corner of our flat earth. Basically, here are the Egyptian dragons. You can check them out, long tail, and with their wings, very much in the typical Egyptian stylized style. And what's interesting to notice is here's where you start to get the erroneous association between the sun and the dragon, with the solar disk immediately on top of the dragon depictions here. But also notice you've got the solar disk with the wings and the pair of uraeas. Now, the uraeas are the rearing cobras, which just come out the side. And that, of course, is a symbol of the dragon. Here we got another one which I thought was quite iconoclastic and depictive of really where we're going with this course material. Again, here, another winged serpent with plumage. These things are often described to have plumage on the top of their heads. And you have bowing down what appears to be someone in worship making an offering. Now, these urns normally contain people's hearts. And with rituals, ripping the heart out, eating it, or offering the heart up to the gods is pretty common. We see that a lot in South America. Depictions with Quetzalcoatl, they offer the heart up to him, and that's this guy over here, South American dragon, Quetzalcoatl. He is a Mesoamerican deity and was worshipped by the Aztecs and Mayans. Is worshipped in various aspects, actually. I think it's called Toltecan or Voltec. Some of those interesting names, but basically Quetzalcoatl means feathered, winged, or plumed serpent. Again, you see the plumage on the top of their heads, not winged in this particular one, but certainly munching on a human being. And many sacrifices were made to Quetzalcoatl, and I must say the Mayans were one of the best at leaving behind a very non-cryptic descriptions of what they were doing. Very descriptive artworks and carvings which detail all the sacrifices, and that seems to be a common thing. They did that as well in Egypt, except they were hidden behind more symbols, but more difficult to decode them. But obviously the Egyptians would have been mystified with the alphabet that we have today if they were presented with one of our books. Australian dragons, known as the rainbow serpent. This Australian deity is credited as being a creator god according to Aborigine folklore and Dreamtime stories. And these guys are normally quite a central theme in Aborigine artworks, which are normally painted with lots of little dots. And I have had the absolute pleasure of seeing an Aborigine artwork myself, and they really are quite phenomenally done. So all this over here has lots and lots of little dots. Just to give you an idea of how far spread these creatures are and how varied they are, but how similar the themes are that seem to be pervasive. Antiboga, of course, the Javanese dragon, and you see the wings, the long serpent-like body, and he is wearing a crown. Of course, here you've got the Chaldean dragon, which, again, the long serpent-like body and wings. Here we've got the African dragon, or at least a drawing, because no one's actually, apart from the various depictions by Dr. Credin-Woodrow, which in and of themselves are not terribly clear, we don't really have any better descriptions or pictures that have been made available to the public. So this is what we've been able to obtain as the representation of the African serpent deity that is often referred to as the Chitauri or Nyoka, which Nyoka is actually another word for instructor or expert, known as the creator. The Swiss dragon. This is the emblem of the city of Basel, and it is that of a basilisk, which is another name for a dragon. And the basilisk, again, has the cockatrice or cockerel features, as I mentioned earlier. And, of course, there's no coincidence, hence the similarity of the etymology of Basel and basilisk. Basel is called Basel because it is named after a basilisk, and that's why they've chosen the basilisk as the image or the motif for the city. And when we get further into the etymology, we'll go into why this is a spiral on the shield held by the basilisk, because that gets very interesting. You see, nothing is by accident. Everything has a reason, but you need to understand the etymology behind it to get what the symbol really means. Otherwise, it just appears as random. The Italian dragon. This particular one is known as the Bicione, which is a dragon commonly depicted swallowing a child and is the coat of arms of the House of Visconti in Milan, Italy. It's an old mosaic. See the theme again of eating humans. It's absolutely everywhere within different cultures. Again, at Bicione, this one's depicted swallowing a child on the Archbishop's palace in the Piazza Duomo. I beg your pardon, Italians will slay me. Piazza Duomo in Milan, Italy. And interesting. On the Archbishop's palace, you've got this guy. And of course, the Bicione appears here. Alfa Romeo. This is the trademark of the famous Italian car manufacturer, Alfa Romeo. And notice the familiar depiction of the Bicione eating the child. And this is alongside the Red Cross. Now, this little dubious Red Cross turns up in quite a few dragon depictions. And you'll see when we get onto the depictions of St. George, just how often it comes up. All right. Angels and saints slaying dragons is a common theme. And, this is probably, I think, the one that got me the most is just these, if these dragons are all bad, why did everybody want to, they just, it's a very mixed thing here. If they are sort of like the baddies controlling everything, why were they're constantly being depicted as being slain? There's a lot of theories behind this. Jordan Maxwell's offered theories that it is the killing of the pagan religion that's being depicted, which happened after Constantine consecrated the Christian religion after the Council of Nicaea in 333 AD. But there's a lot of different mythologies to this. But one thing is for sure, that this is so pervasive. Saints and angels. Throughout Christianic mythology, there is a constant recurring theme of angels and saints slaying dragons, and it just seems to be like every saint and angel is getting in on the dragon slaying game. Here we go. See St. George and the dubious Red Cross, which is the cross of St. George. It's also became the Maltese Cross and the Red Cross of hospitals, and of course the charity known as the Red Cross. In fact, it's the most bastardized symbol out there, but in this instance it forms the St. George's Cross, and this particular painting is by Paolo Uccello from the 15th century. And basically, one of the most famous stories of knights slaying dragons is of St. George slaying the dragon, and St. George is the patron saint of England. And of course, this is apparently all over saving a woman. And again, when we go in a bit more into sort of how mind control has been initiated, we will talk a little bit about how we can gain clues into this through these kind of stories, propaganda stories. Another depiction of St. George slaying the seven-headed dragon. Now, this one's a rather interesting depiction. I really like this, and I thought I'd spend a bit of time on this. It's from an 1851 engraving depicting the beast of the apocalypse and the mother goddess. Now, the mother goddess is normally always depicted standing on a moon, usually depicted with either a halo around the head or an aureola, as she is in this case, which is a luminous light cloud, normally symbolic of sun rays, and with the token stars around the crown, which you normally find a circle of stars around the mother goddess crown anyway. This one's a rather spangled crown she's got on there. But you'll notice the five-headed dragon, which turns up in the book of Revelations. And what else have I missed out? The mother goddess, supposedly the whore of Babylon, who is depicted standing on a moon as she is surrounded by an aureola. She's also depicted with wings and a star-spangled crown. And you can see the word dracone over here. Raptors for the rapture, which is of course referring to Revelations. Saint Margaret and the Dragon. Now this is interesting. I love the story of Saint Margaret and the Dragon. The story goes that Saint Margaret was so pure that when a dragon appeared to eat her, she apparently just split the dragon in half and appeared from inside the dragon holding her cross, because she was in such a pure and holy state. But of course, that wasn't enough to prove her purity and chastity, and she was beheaded anyway. But one of the things I always love about these depictions, and I must say some of the old artworks I found of St. Margaret are truly beautiful. I think people were very fascinated with it. There's a lot of detail and some really beautiful renderings of this particular myth. But I always find it fascinating how you can see the naughty dragon face with the cloak coming out of its mouth. You see, the cloak is red here. And if you check here, I love this. Here we go. Here's St. Margaret popping out of the dragon again, holding a cross. You can see she's got a halo around her. She's holy. And the cloak is coming out. The blue cloak that she's wearing always comes out the dragon's mouth. And that's how you know it's St. Margaret and the dragon. It's either St. Marguerite or St. Margaret, depending on which country you're in. The legend changes. Again, here's another one. This is a beautiful, beautiful rendering of this picture, and you can see it's rather old as well. But over here, you've got the blue cloak coming out the mouth. Again, St. Margaret and the dragon. And this particular Christianic myth evolved from much earlier myths and then evolved some more again and into another Christianic myth called Saint Marina and the Dragon. I think Saint Marina actually gives clearer allusions to its pagan origins of the myth, because when we get on to discuss the whole aquatic dragonology section, when we go into mermaids and stuff like that, it becomes obvious why Saint Marina would be a chosen name. The marine theme is a big theme, water theme, a huge theme when it comes to dragons. In fact, all 4 elementals are. But it's interesting to notice here we've got what looks like she's hammering a human-looking with interesting horns, forked tongue, wings. Can't really sort of make out what kind of dragon it is, just a bit of a human-like, but that's claws going on there. But definitely using a hammer. And the hammer theme seems to come in here when you go to the Norse legends and you look at Thor, and that is a hammer over there. So I've cropped it off, but that is Thor carrying his hammer. And of course, the legends of Thor, if you've ever looked at Marvel Comics, seen the Chris Hemsworth vehicles, they made 2 of them that are currently available for viewing for public brainwashing. You will see that Thor has a hammer. That is his chosen weapon. And the hammer is, like many symbolic totems, quite symbolic of the specific bloodline. Like the Sword of Arthur and the glass slipper in Cinderella, which, again, I shall go into when I go into other dragonology lectures. But here, a depiction of Thor and his hammer hunting Midgard the serpent, taken from an 18th century Icelandic manuscript. And this is an area which I'm going to spend a bit more time on, particularly because it ties a lot into the flat earth stuff, which has been coming up quite a bit recently. Now, it's not just saints, but blessed hell, the archangels are getting in on the dragon slaying business. Here we go. Archangel Michael slaying the dragon. And this is quite a freakish looking dragon, but it's from an old manuscript again. This one's got talons and claws and everything coming out of it. But I can't even make out Cockatrice's face and things coming out of its face. That looks more like something out of Beetlejuice than anything I've commonly looking dragon I've seen. But nonetheless, artistic license, interestingly depicted, being slain by Archangel Michael. And that theme is then further continued by Saint Michael slaying the basilisk. And this is one of my favorite depictions. I love this particular. I'm going to go spend a whole dragonology lecture in the city of Zwolle, which is in Holland, one of my favorite cities here. I mentioned it before in a previous chat I did with Lisa Harrison, but this little city is just amazing. The city seal, which comes from 1295, depicts Saint Michael slaying the basilisk. And the etymological significance, I'm going to start jumping into etymology at this point, because basilisk is, of course, as I said earlier, similar to Basel, which is why Basel and basilisk are the names they are. And then in the city, it has the most phenomenal basilica, but only certain cathedrals are appointed as basilicas by the Pope. Okay, and also it's interesting to note the ancient Greek word basileus, it's also the Latin word for king. Basileus does mean king. You may have heard of the term Basileus Taltheo. Okay. St. Michael slaying the dragon, another one. But I love this particular picture, and I'll go through this one a bit of detail. But here we start to see where we'll be going next in terms of looking at themes, and that is the half human, half serpent likeness. So here we've got something that's distinctly human looking, okay, wings on the back, but serpent body, okay? St. Michael slaying the dragon. Have a good look at that. And here it starts to get funky, okay? At first look, you would notice, obviously, there's the serpent tail attached to the legs, and this is the picture of Jupiter. It's called Jupiter Seduces Olympia by Giulio Romano from the 16th century, 1526. It's an interesting depiction of the rape of Olympia. Now, there's a lot of depictions of Jupiter or Zeus raping people. It's either Semele or Olympia in this case. But Jupiter, interestingly enough, is also known, the Italian name of this painting is Giove, not Zeus. He's referenced by the Italian name. You want to put the Italian name of this painting on it, he is referenced as Giove. And Jehovah is actually just the Italian spelling of Jehovah, which, you know, Jehovah's Witness, we've heard that word before, just to show you how example of how gods are relabeled as language evolves, is reinterpreted, as different symbols take on different sounds and different meanings. And again, start to reference the familiar theme we're climbing very heavily into now, which is the half human, half serpent form. And one of the things you always notice with Zeus is normally got thunderbolts or lightning bolts depicted somewhere, as well as an eagle. An eagle is a depiction. Now, the Roman eagle is supposed to originate with Jupiter or Zeus. Here again, the roof of the Sistine Chapel, the Michelangelo depiction of the fall of man is depicted with just incredibly, the flesh work on this is amazing. I just absolutely love this picture. But this, to me, is just so beautifully done. The depth and the way in which, so I'm getting my art head on, I'm supposed to be focusing on the words here, I beg your pardon. The half human, half serpent is symbolic of metamorphosis. Dragons have been described as zoomorphic, meaning that animals can shapeshift, all right? Zoomorphic is a word meaning animals that can shapeshift. And there's, there's something going on with my sound. Can you hear that?
Yeah. You've got a link playing.
Sorry?
Don't you the stream playing somewhere?
I beg your pardon, guys. I think my stream has just come on. Oh, isn't that funny? My own network's just come on me. Excuse me. These things do happen. Technical glitches. All right, then. Where were we? Right. As I was saying, there is a Latin word that actually does basically incorporate or describe what zoomorphic means. Okay, I beg your pardon. Zoomorphic is the Latin word. We'll be talking about the Greek word, which we use for zoomorphic, which is an animal or a being that can shapeshift. All right, the half human, half serpent theme pops up everywhere, and it's interesting. In all parts of the world, it's the same thing, and it's such a clear and distinct theme that it cannot be ignored. So I'm going to draw attention to it and hope people start to recognize the patterns for themselves and see this is not just some far-flung realm of conspiracy research, but you know, you can't ignore artworks that are hundreds of years old and are all depicting the same thing from different parts of the world when there was no TV, there was no telephone, there was no internet. So why they're all depicting the same thing? So throughout almost all cultures and regions, there are constantly reoccurring themes of half human, half serpent beings representative of physical change, physical metamorphosis from one state to another. Okay. This is a depiction on the north frieze of the Pergamon. Okay, and have a little look over here. If you can't make that out, it goes all the way up there. That's a tail coming out of a leg that goes like that. Okay, and this is part of a decorative feature of the great altar of the Pergamon, which is at least 2,500 years old. Again, we see the reoccurring theme of half human, half serpent. And just to tell you about where this little guy is, the great altar of the Pergamon originates in Bergama, Izmir province in Turkey. Now, this was part of, back then, the ancient Greek Empire, which is, don't be confused. I mean, you think, why would that have been in Turkey? Turkey is a completely different country to Greece nowadays, but it was part of the Hellenistic Empire. This obviously was during the time of Hitler. A lot of that stuff was moved to Germany. And of course, the altar of the Pergamon is now located at the Pergamon Museum in Berlin. And this altar was dedicated to Zeus and was referred to by John of Patmos as Satan's throne. This is in the book of Revelations. So you can actually go look that up. And here it is, Satan's throne in Berlin, recovered by Hitler. Tells you a lot, doesn't it? Okay, now we start getting into a little bit of mythology. Since we start looking at Greek architecture and all of that, we start noticing some of these beautiful old wood carvings. This one, Cadmus and Harmonia, or Hermione, as it is said in French. And here you can clearly see again the depiction of half human, half serpent. And if you guys are interested, do yourself a favor and go have a little read of some of the Greek legends and start to see how many of them depict dragons, half humans, half serpent. It's all serpent and all dragon. It's actually overwhelmingly obvious as to what these creatures are. Cadmus, of course, is credited with being the founder of the sacred city of Thebes, which is a city I'm endlessly fascinated with, and I discuss quite a bit through the course of this material. Now, this is, of course, Thebes in the ancient city of Greece, also known as the City of Seven Gates, and it's distinctly different, of course, from Thebes in Egypt. The Thebes in Greece was actually specifically referenced as the City of Seven Gates. In fact, in the Sophocles play called Antigone, the opening lines goes, hail the sun, the city of seven gates, city of Thebes. So the one in Greece is specifically referenced as the city of seven gates, and that is how you can tell the two cities of Thebes apart. Typhon. Okay, one of the most scary. Typhon is a Greek deity often described as a monster, the most feared of all the deities of ancient Greek culture. And this is a picture on a 6th century crater. I think this is a 6th century BC, which presently resides in the Museum of Munich. Again, you can see very human-like looking features and then the serpent legs. See? Human upper body. And this is where we start to see the appearance of the Phrygian cap, which you will find adorning the head of Mithra. You'll find these things becoming a little bit longer and also going that way, which then became wizards' caps. And they ended up incarnating into what became Santa Claus's hat. So very interesting to see that this hat is adorning, the Phrygian cap is adorning the head of the most feared of the Greek gods, which is Typhon, supposed to be the devil of Greek mythology, which is interesting because Santa also wears this, and there's a very close correlation between the word Santa and Satan. Anyway, I digress. Notice also wings on the back. These wings, very symbolic. Of course, moving on to Chinese mythology, there is a story of Lady Whitesnake, which pre-exists written compilations, and this goes back way back to oral traditions before things were actually started being written down. The tale of Lady Whitesnake, also known as Madame Whitesnake, is a very, very old legend. And in this picture, you can actually see the lady's head with the snake body. Here is just, I think, a better representation of what Lady Whitesnake was. They were trying to portray in that picture because it wasn't terribly clear. Go back, you can see it was just the head and the tail. And this is also a 14th century depiction, but you can also see the same sort of thing going on here. Face of a human being, body of a snake. And this is a really, really sweet little myth of Chinese folklore. Nuwa and Fuzi, brother and sister, very much akin to the Enlil and Enki of Sumerian mythology. And basically brother and sister who were credited with the creation of humanity, as well as inventing hunting, fishing, cooking, and writing. And that's, of course, very interesting. Not agriculture, because, of course, human beings were vegetarians until we had dragon influence. Now, the Twisted Naga couple, of course, the one I showed you before were brother and sister, but you also have, and we do have this coming up quite a bit, the couple, the king and queen. This is a sculpture of a Naga couple in Halebidu in India. It's a few thousand years old. And Naga is the Sanskrit or Pali word for a serpent-like god or dragon. And I will spend quite a lot of time going through stuff on the Naga as we progress through the material of dragonology in another episode. Here we move into European sort of Crusader time mythology. Although this is written in the 1400s, this actually goes back a few hundred years earlier, Queen Melusine, around about the time of the Crusades. And this is one of my favorite parts of history. I really enjoy getting into the Melusine material, and I've actually made quite a few pieces under my Freedom Central label on Queen Melusine, and I have quite an attachment to Queen Melusine. And that will become, as I go through the material, we get to delve deep into her and get to understand a little bit more about what's going on there. This particular illustration done by Jean de Arras, who basically was the person who compiled the best Melusine tales, which have been translated and reinterpreted all over the world. And this painting is estimated to originate from about 1450. Melusine was the queen of Anjou and actually did exist. She's historically documented to have existed and to have spawned the Anjouvian dynasty. Okay, who were rather cruel, apparently. She was said to be by servants half human and half serpent, with the ability to change shape between the two, and she is sometimes depicted with wings. And sometimes she's depicted with her tail split into two, often holding each tail in either hand. Melusine is often referenced in folklore as a mermaid or a siren. But of course, this is where Melusine pops up commonly in modern day culture, which is the Starbucks coffee logo. Dragon logos and symbolism are absolutely everywhere, and they slip past the perception of most people whilst being hidden in plain sight. Much like the Alfa Romeo logo, it's right in your face. It's right in your face here with Starbucks. Right. Interesting, Vlad III, also known as Vlad Tepes or Vlad the Impaler, and Vlad Dracula was also a descendant from the Anjouvian dynasty. Same family, same bloodline. He was named Dracula on account of his membership to the Order of the Dragon. Bram Stoker's novel Dracula was based on Vlad III. So this brings up the question, is the Queen a dragon? Now, we hear a lot about this stuff going, and I'm sure anyone coming into this information or watching this for the first time, this is where they switch off and they go, right, she's lost me. But we have to consider the evidence, and, just in a few short steps. For me, it's compelling enough to look at twice as to what we've presented, because the Queen is, in fact, a descendant of the Angevins and Vlad the Impaler, the same bloodline we can trace the Queen too. So there's a very good chance that she actually could be. And then, of course, there's the obvious evidence which pops up in the public view, which is a 16th century portrait of Elizabeth I, which has been sitting in the National Portrait Gallery on display since 1921. But the wear and tear on the painting actually revealed something. It's a painting of Elizabeth I, which, if you have a look in her left hand, it was painted over, and that is where there would have been a little snake. And when they did the reinterpretation of what it would have looked like, that is what it would have looked like. You can see they didn't do a very good job of covering it up. They stuck some leaves in here and covered it with some flowers, but the white flowers have faded and the green of the snake in the background has come through. It's visible through her hand as well. So they did an artist impression, and basically it's Queen Elizabeth I standing there holding a snake. Now, it's rather odd, isn't it? Let's go into the etymology and see why it's not that odd, and why, in fact, this is the very interwoven fabric of our reality, interwoven into our language. Etymology, for me, and the way we're going to deprogram ourselves from our language matrix, this is what etymology and the science of it has become to me here in this reality now, is not understanding where words come from, but a deconstruction of words and language, so that we can all deprogram and deconstruct the matrix, which starts, of course, with language and understanding. All right, so dragon and serpentine etymology. To get an understanding of some basic words and how they're made up, you got to understand some of the key basic root words. And we're going to start with the first core of root words, which is the or, the or, orphy root. And of course, the I substitute for the Y or E, but variations of these is basically dragon or serpentine root words. And I'll give you some examples of this so you understand this. Metamorphosis. Okay, and I love this. Metamorphosis as a transformation, a change which renders a person completely unrecognizable, just like the Hulk. And I just thought that was rather cute, brings humor to this. But basically, the word metamorphosis actually has been developed to describe the process of the changing of shape of the serpent or dragon, because of the fact that they deliberately included this root word into it. It's unmistakable. This word was developed to describe the process of dragon shapeshifting. Dragon shapeshifting to what? Most likely human or another animal, as they've been known to do in mythology. Who knows? But this is metamorphosis. The word was definitely used to describe a dragon shapeshift. That's why it was invented. That's where it originates from. It doesn't originate from metamorphosis of the butterfly and the cocoon like we're taught in school. The word metamorphosis is normally attached to that idea of metamorphosis, but the origination of it is most certainly, because of the root word, or definitely unmistakably rooted with dragons. So dragons have been documented to completely change shape, also known as shape-shifting, a term coined, a term made popular by David Icke. And you start to see the orf turning up in some pretty interesting places. Porphyrogentius. Now there's two serpent root words in here, and it's orf and gen, which I will go into when you start getting into the jinn and genius and Gioni and all of that. But basically, we're dealing with the orf part now. The official meaning of Porphyrogentius means born in the purple. And with all my work, I don't do anything for no reason. When I mark this in purple going forward, it means we're referencing dragon etymology or something to do with the dragon. So basically, Porphyrogentius means purple born, which is supposed to indicate that you were born in the royal bedchamber, which is usually purple, a very special color reserved only for royalty. Okay, and before I carry on, let me explain this to you. Okay, purple is a secondary color. Purple is derived of two primary colors, blue and red. And they are the perfect antithesis of what I would describe as hot and cold, black and white, negative and positive, male and female, yin and yang. That would be red and blue. They are that to each other. And when you have the two polar opposites this is how all creation happens, is move between the 2 points of polar opposites, okay? The active and passive generative principles is the space in which creation happens. And basically, because of the fact that they are the two extremes of the active and passive generative principles, that is red and blue, when you put them together, you get the highest vibrating frequency you can get. And it's a fact, purple has the highest vibrational frequency, which is why you see a lot of people, particularly the New Age people, running around wearing purple. And it's not by accident that the king's chamber was purple. Well, it was a very expensive color to make back in those days, but apart from that, it actually has the highest vibrational frequency. And as we go through this material and we get into cult ritualism, you'll start to realize that everything is about energetic manipulation for these people. So the fact that it's purple is, of course, very interesting because they want to maximize the frequency, all about energetic frequency. That's why the purple. So they knew things, very smart, and have kept this knowledge from us. Recurring theme. Okay, Porphyro Gentius means being born into the ruling Basileus, which is the king, the reigning king or emperor, who is usually of the dragon bloodline. And this theme, again, people say, oh, you're reaching here. Again, you're assuming that the kings are a dragon bloodline, but it becomes more obvious as you start to dissect the language and you start to look closer into the etymology as we go through it. Royalty marries royalty. There's always been a history of royalty being obsessed with bloodlines and horrendously interbreeding. And in fact, the current Queen Elizabeth has, I think, 2 cousins who both died as disabled people in care, and she never visited them. But basically, they're obsessed with bloodlines and interbreeding and, keeping the bloodlines pure and all that. And there's a very, very good reason for that. And again, this comes up in the language. And I'll do a bit more on Constantine and the Porphyro Gentius and how it's very interesting. And I actually feel quite sorry for these people. They use like political pawns in games, actually. But basically, the purple born, which is supposed to indicate that you're born in the royal bedchamber, is a special color used for royalty. And basically, it also means if you're Porphyro Gentius, that most certainly means that you are part of the dragon bloodline. But it's a well-documented historical fact that royalty are obsessed with bloodlines and interbreeding. Those born Porphyro Gentius were normally married to other Porphyro Gentius. The imperial diplomacy of a Porphyro Gentius bride was usually sent as a seal to seal a bargain. Okay, so in imperial diplomacy, a Porphyro Gentius bride was often sent to seal a bargain. So basically, a king would send his daughter to a foreign land, to a king there, so that they can merge lands, but they had to be of Porphyro Gentius bloodline. Here's where we start to see the Orphan etymology turning up in Greek mythology. Morpheus from Greek mythology. Now, many of you know the name Morpheus became famous in the film The Matrix. The character, obviously, that famously held out his hands with the red and the blue pill. Morpheus is a character that appears in Ovid's Latin novel called Metamorphos. Not a coincidence either. The Roman counterpart of Morpheus was Somnia. If you can't sleep, you're said to have insomnia. Okay? And then, of course, there was Orpheus, the supposed god of music, poetry, a prophet, and there were just so many cults dedicated to Orpheus. Actually, they were called the Orphic Mysteries, and they still kind of go on. There are still Orphic Mysteries performed and groups dedicated to Orpheus nowadays. But this is basically, he's said to be the inventor of music, able to charm animals with his music. And again, we see the Phrygian cap turning up on Orpheus and the serpentine etymology. But the word orchestra actually comes from Orpheus. And when we start going into modern day cultural music, rock and roll and all that, contracts with the devil. Start looking at what music actually is, how it originated. It ties into ritual and theatre, and yeah, it gets pretty groovy. The goddess Sophia. Sophia is the personification of wisdom. Okay. Sophia, as you can see again, the Ophi serpent root word. She's an iconoclast, sometimes revered by the mother goddess worship groups in the New Age today. But what's interesting is if you've been watching any of the Mark Sargent stuff about the seven heavens and all of that, there's a lot of this when it comes to Sophia as well. And you can notice that by the 7 steps there. Ophiuchus. Ophiuchus is a constellation. Now, I beg your pardon. Let me get this right. It's actually the 13th astrological symbol in the Hermetic zodiac. That's right. There are 13 symbols, not 12. We're commonly taught that there are 12 symbols. And Ophi makes up, obviously, the first part of Ophiuchus. And Ophiuchus is obviously depicted astride serpents, which is divided into serpent's caput, the head part, and serpent's cauda, which nonetheless make up one constellation despite having 2 names to each part. And of course, Ophiuchus is the serpent bearer. And then we get the word philosophy. Philosophy, obviously, taken from the Ophi root word. Now, when we get into a little bit deeper into this Sophia and Sefer, to read, to teach, to learn, all of that ties in quite interestingly into the etymology that is very common with serpentine etymology, and that is the etymology of reading, writing, and everything associated with it. Which is why we go into etymology, because it is a creation of the dragon. Words, symbols, language. All right, now for me, this is the biggest in terms of the dragon root words, and one of the ones that gives away so much. And rather than kind of try to wax lyrically about it, I just take you through some of the words that it actually stems into. And wow, when you look at the words that really are serpent rooted and what they mean, it's interesting. And I like the word scary, but let's just say it's interesting. So from the top, we have common words rooted in dragon etymology are origin, orientation, oriental, order, world, word, sword, story, horn, porn and pornography, horny, orgy, orgasm, organ, referencing both the body part and the musical instrument found in churches, orphan, scary one, and north. Orthodox, Mormon, Ouroboros, court, mortal and immortal, George, oracle, oral, Morgan or Morgana, Gorgon, as in the Greek ogre, or Orcus, Orcus, worship, whore, war, and arch, or arch, which I would further extend to archer and archangel. Wow. If any of you know a little bit about what's going on in the world, about how orphans are actually meals for dragons, about the ritualism and cult practice that pretty much covers this theming from porn to orgasm, then knights, swords, and stories of scribes, which are controlled by the Catholic Church, New World Order, Oriental orientation, origin. biggest belief. And then you got, of course, the religious themed words such as Orthodox and Mormon. And then, of course, the Ouroboros is a snake eating its tail. Court, the creation of our control system. And, of course, so it goes on. Worship, whore, and most importantly, war. Magic words. Okay, here's where we get into word magic. All right. This is the part we need to start getting our heads around, because this is what it's all about, is understanding how to use those words in the right way so that we don't put spells on ourselves. Word magic. All words and language written and spoken have power. Word spells are created when we are taught at school to spell words. To write is to perform a rite or a ritual, which is why we are taught to write in cursive, to curse ourselves. The power of sound, okay? The creative power of sound. If any of you are interested, please Google cymatics and check out some of the videos on YouTube. And cymatics is the visual expression of how particles attune to sound frequencies. And this is an amazing art form. And I was actually at the Breakthrough Energy Movement Conference in 2012, where I had the pleasure of meeting Fernando Vossa. And let me just say, he's the only man that I'd ever walk into a dark room with, because he took me into this completely dark room and showed me sound waves playing through a ball of water, which actually manifested into light patterns. And it was just phenomenal to see how you can actually physically see sound. And this is an example of that and what sound becomes. And cymatics, obviously, particles responding to frequency. Very interesting. But what this demonstrates is how different sounds are capable of creation and manifestation, which is a key part of spell and ritual. Now, the serpentine spell is important to understand, and it's been done through the use of our current alphabet and language. Every character in the alphabet has value and meaning other than what we are taught. And you may notice I've put the word alpha in purple, and that'll become significant as we go through this material through other lectures as well. But I'll give you some reference material at the end so you can kind of pick up on what the alpha is if you didn't get the hint with Alfa Romeo, the Italian car. But basically, sentences are constructed in specific ways to trap us into the serpentine spell. So this is quite a complex, not really, but convoluted tapestry that gets interwoven. And it's difficult to know where to sort of climb in. So I always start at the beginning. And John 1, verse 1 to 18 is referenced here. And John 1, verse 1 quite simply says, and it says here, you may see, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, there's three words in this I want you guys to pay attention to, because we will be covering them in great detail. The first one is the word word, the word God, and of course, John. Now, the story of John will become more clear when I go into the material of Ioannis and talk a bit more about the stuff put forward by Palmer Manly Hall, and talk about St. John and Johannism and all of that. But in the meantime, we're going to focus on two words that are important for this particular lecture, which is word and God. Okay. Now, my journey of discovery really did start with my inner desire to know and find God. You know, I've been through so much in my life, and I just wanted to know what really it was all about, and if there was a bigger plan or a bigger picture or some good in the world or some divine protector or order or whatever it was. I was intent on knowing who or what and finding it. And really, I think a lot of people who begin this journey of discovery, perhaps they start that way too, is searching for God. And in a certain way, that was it for me, my deepest spiritual journey anyway. I mean, And I went to a Baptist church for years. I lived across the road from one when I lived in South Africa. And, I've had the opportunity to use all the experience that I've had and when I was going to church in the work that I'm doing now. And throughout time to always go back and question the relevance of everything and what the concept of God really means. And well, in this context, I guess I'd really like to talk of it in terms of we talk about words being creative, okay? And I don't necessarily say that in the beginning was the word. I think first you have thought, which manifests an intention. First, you have to have the initial thought of something, and then the intention, which the intention will manifest the action, whether it's a pure intention or malevolent intention. It's first the thought, which then brings the intention, which then brings the action, which then brings the word, which is either spoken or written. And of course, this forms part of communication. Through communication, we have manifestation and creation. So for me, that is the creational process, okay? That would come from whatever the creational element is. Whether that word be sound, the word, whether that word be God, the creator, it's all tied in. Now, the word, writing, or spoken word, is being referenced when we're talking here. Writing is actually dead. Spoken word is living. That's why they do spells. They say them out. Even if they write it down, it has to be spoken to give it energy. Sound has vibrational frequency. It is creative. It's on paper, there's no creative element to it. That's why they chant these mantras and spells over and over again to bring life to it. Spoken word is living. Writing is dead. And the 3D physical demonstration of that is the fact that certificates and all sorts of official documents, which are dead documents, are normally embossed, which means they're stamped, and there's a indented area and there's a raised area. And the reason they do that is because it is symbolic of the ritualistic raising from the dead. Don't forget, all writing is ritual, right? Writ. It's all the same language. So, and one of the most common rituals is the raising from the dead. It comes up, the raising from the dead comes up with the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. You got that with the Christianic myths and the raising of Jesus. It's always the same kind of rituals. And ironically, they're always associated with blood drinking as well. In the Christianic rituals, you've got the Eucharist, which, funny enough, then Jesus rose from the dead 3 days later after he was crucified. But the Eucharist, the drinking of the blood and wine, was what? The night before he was crucified. So they're all tied together. All this sort of thing ties in together, and all myths and all legends and all Christianic mythology are symbolic of pretty much the same few basic fundamental ideas, which ultimately all originate with a few concepts, which is dragon worship and ritual. Further expanding this idea, basically, red seals. What was the purpose of red seals? Okay, the red wax of a seal, symbolic of blood. By stamping the seal, a raised part is created, which symbolically gives life to the dead manuscript, which is why magic spells often use seals and symbols in craft. Okay, the red wax is symbolic of blood. They stamp it to raise it, to give life to it. Okay, raise it from the dead. So if the word is God, okay, we need to actually look at what God is in languages before the concept of God was in our language. The word God wasn't always God. So if we start to look at what God is, the concept of God that we read about, the controlling God, the God that created this reality, or the gods for that matter, and we look in the other languages, it starts to get a little funky, folks, because the ancient Greek word for God in the singular is the. Gods is theoi, okay, T-H-E. Now, why this is interesting is because this starts to turn up in names and things that relate to the gods. And one of the most easy and commonly known illustrations is Athena, probably one of the most popular gods and well-known names in Greek mythology because of the city of Athens being named after Athena. And this is a statue known as the Athena Gustiani. And you can notice it's a copy of a Greek statue. Basically, it displays Athena with her serpent, Erythronius. I won't even try and say that name, but basically, interesting to see Athena displayed with what is her serpent, her pet. Now, she also wore a cloak of serpents, which is interesting. And we'll get into that in another lecture. But basically, you can see she has the Thi in her name. This is further illustrated again by the fact that the Thi turns up in the temple dedicated to Athena called the Parthenon. The Parthenon, or the Temple of Athena Parthenos, basically is in the city of Athens, and it's ruined. But I mean, this thing is such a solid structure that even when the Romans came and looted the hell out of this place and tore it apart, so much of it is still standing. It was actually used for a while as a Catholic church, but there's amazing stories about the statue of Athena that used to be in here. It was one of the most magnificent works of art of the ancient world. And again, notice the The, The. It's all referring to God, gods, dragon theming. Now, showing this in a practical context, or illustrating this, I should say, words using the root word are monotheism, which is the worship of a god, pantheism, which is the worship of many gods, pantheon, which is supposedly the home of the gods, Thebes, city I spoke of earlier, and we shall deal more with that as we go through the course of this material. The Theban priesthood is an interesting area of study. In fact, we'll go there into that quite deeply as we go into etymology. And of course, theatre and thesaurus. Actually, thesaurus has two interesting root words, and it's the and sal. Sal, which basically is the root of light in Arabic, and saurus is actually lizard in Latin, sauro. So you've got the light, which is Lucifer, sauro, lizard, the god, theming coming through. And all this becomes evident as we climb further into the information. But it's these four words which just completely blow my mind. And this ties into everything we've been talking about through the course of this material. So I'll take you through what they mean, and we'll talk a bit about this. Theotokos basically is the offspring of the gods, the son or daughter, children of the gods. Those who are purple-born, porphyrogenitus, are the Theotokos. Okay, so this is the Greek word for it. Porphyrogenitus would obviously be the Latin expression of the same meaning. Hemithoi. Now, hemi, if you think of what the Earth is a globe, if it is a globe, you'd have the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. So hemi is half. Okay, hemithoi basically means half human, half god, or half dragon, or demigod, or god king. Interesting. Then we got therianthropy. Beg your pardon, getting it together. Therianthropy. Therianthropy is the ability to change shape. And anthropomorphic obviously means the ability to, when they talk about an anthropomorphized sun, which is a sun symbol with a face on it, that's what it's referring to, is something with a human-like quality, okay, face of the sun. So we talk about anthropology, okay, it's the same thing, the study of humans and cultures, theoanthropy, the ability to change shape, but referencing changing into human shape, God changing into human shape. Interesting. And then, I love this one, theophania, beautiful word. Theophania, the sudden appearance of God out of nowhere. And it's got the root word and feign, which actually is the root of phantom, okay? Like a phantom would appear out of nowhere or disincarnate, so 1 minute they're there, 1 minute they're not. That's what that refers to, the sudden appearance of God out of nowhere. So these little critters just suddenly turn up because guess what? They're multidimensional, guys. They certainly can just move in and out of anywhere they want to. Okay, I think I'm done. Hour and a half. Woohoo! I made it through our first episode of Dragonology. I can't believe it. But please, guys, tune in next week. Episode 2 is going to be very interesting. We're going to climb deep into the stuff, and there's a lot to know. So that'll be next week, Thursday, the 2nd of April at 9 p.m. GMT. And if any of you haven't seen my 2 documentaries called Chasing the Dragons Part 1 and 2, please, guys, go check them out. Obviously, it'll help put a lot of this material into context. And when you come back and follow on with the course material going through the films, will then obviously help put that into context too for you. So it'll be building upon your knowledge. It's not something you can just take in once and it's it. You really do have to sort of multi-layer it up and understand it from a lot of different ways. And hopefully, I'm able to portray that and put across many different contexts. And hopefully this will form an interesting part of a deprogramming process for you. I am actually in the process of writing the Dragonology book, Dragonology, the Encyclopedia of Dragons, which I've been working on for a long time. I actually set out to write the South African Guide to the Global Conspiracy, book 1, 2, and 3. Book 1 is Light and Dark. It got published, long story there. But book 2 was supposed to be The Eye of the Dragon, and it turned into 2 documentaries and, of course, the series. And it's now going to be turning into an encyclopedia called Dragonology instead of being called The Eye of the Dragon. And so just to give you an understanding of how that kind of ties into my work and why the Eye of the Dragon is not happening, rather it's evolved into something much bigger, and we should never be afraid of that, never be afraid to allow things to evolve. So that's what we've done. And it's a massive body of work. It's an absolutely huge, huge book. And we want to do it in full color because of all the pictures and sources that, just can't do them justice in black and white. And of course, printing in color does cost money. We certainly don't have the money to publish this book. So we are putting out a crowdfunding request for the publication in print. If anyone's interested in seeing Dragonology put into print, please, guys, feel free to contribute to our crowdfunding campaign. And if you wish to do so, you can go to consciousconsumernetwork.tv/donations-page, or go to our homepage on consciousconsumernetwork.tv and look for the big red heart. Click on there and it'll take you through to our donations page. And of course, CCN brings a variety of mind-expanding content to the viewers all over the world. So please do check us out and watch some of the other programs we've got. And especially check out our new French language site, which is french.consciousconsumernetwork.tv. A big thank you to Cyriliel and the French team for getting that going. Very proud of you guys. We're looking forward to seeing this going up in multiple languages very, very soon. But of course, we need public support to make that happen. Biggie and I have no income, and we really would like to bring a greater, more expanded CCN to the world with lots more information to you and lots of different manifestations. But for now, I just want to say thank you for your attention and your interest. It has been an absolute pleasure to discuss my passion, which is dragons, with you all. It's not a subject I often get to discuss, and really indulged for an hour and a half. So a very big thank you to you all, and a big thank you to my partner in crime, Biggie, for producing this session for me. And I hope to catch up with you guys next week. Until then, take care.